It's been a long time since I used the word corrective exercises, because in the end of the day, I don't think you're correcting anything when you look at it into the context of how that word seemed to come about. I was wrong. I think a lot of other people were wrong. I think they're still wrong. What I don't think is wrong is the value of those exercises. I just don't think we're correcting anything. And I think that's important, because when we call them correctives, or if someone is now entrenched in they're correcting something and they think something's wrong, I think that is potentially a mistake, because you might be doing that for a very, very long time and you don't have to. And that kind of limits where we're going with this training approach. Now, where the value is as a special exercise. It's also an appreciation that you can only get there when you have a very, very strong view on what joints are doing, whether they can get into the right positions to absorb adaptive stress, whether they can't all the time. So when you, let's say, change positions, all of a sudden their hip does what you need it to do. Maybe if you add a stabilization demand, like you pull a rubber band and all of a sudden or you hold on to a kettlebell, all of a sudden they can squat ass to grass. Maybe if you eliminate joints, meaning their ribs are in the next county when they're standing, but when they're on their knees, that doesn't necessarily mean the ankles are affecting the ribs, but that whole proprioceptive environment just changes what they can do it. That means the joints can get into the right positions. You might also find that if you passively move a joint, that is always how it can happen. But all of those things are always in context to your training approach. So they can do it. They can do it sometimes. Sometimes they can never do it when you change positions, eliminate joints, change stabilization demands, or active versus passive. No matter what, their shoulder can't get past a certain area. That then speaks to your training program in somewhat of a restrictive fashion. And then regardless of how the joint gets into position, if it hurts, well, then we need to ask some more questions. So you're building out 4 levels of special exercises, because we should be able to create exercises that take advantage of joints that can do what we want them to do, but then muscles may not be able to deliver everything that we want them to do. There's going to be a whole slew of exercises that fit the adaptive patterns of motor skill acquisition. Maybe we like to call that scapular stability. Maybe we like to call that core control. Whatever you want to call it, you have already determined that the joints can do what you want it to do. There's a different adaptive model for joints that never get into position, and that's mobility. And mobility training is very, very different than motor skill training. Sometimes, in certain patterns, you can mix them and match them and you get what you want. But by definition, to learn how to do something is a completely different adaptive strategy than actually changing the direction or the relaxation of certain tissues. And then exercises to change pain is an entire kaleidoscope that's constantly changing, if you will, to pick the right things out of a manual. We've got to look at the person. You got to make sure, whether the pain is medical. Obviously, that's a quick referral. If the pain is orthopedic, maybe that's not a referral, but torn hamstrings that are this far apart don't typically heal on their own or do well with exercise. Or sometimes it's neuromuscular, and you can put a band around their knees and spread the band apart and their knee pain disappears. It was never really anything structural at the knee. It was more their brain perceiving it under different environment. You change the environment with the band. That would have been a combination of pain and motor control. But all of those things have to be in context with the training choices that you want to make, so you can pick and choose where you're going to intervene. But if we go back to special exercises, we're looking to find the weak link as to why you can't deliver a certain standard of movement. You have to decide the standards. So when we look at some of our big lifts, where's the sticking point? And then we choose special exercises for fitness, for strength, for power. If you can sometimes get into the position, sometimes delivering different types of skill, not necessarily strength. I don't think lower trap gets stronger. I don't think serratus anterior gets stronger. I don't think glute medius gets stronger. But what they can do is contract within a proprioceptive construct that makes you deliver more force in a very desirable way. But again, you have to have context of what is that desirable way look like, and then once it looks good, how far to the moon are you trying to shoot in terms of your strength, power, and endurance? Obviously, mobility and pain are far more costly if you continue to train through those things. The special exercises for motor skills, special exercises for mobility, not a huge catalog of special exercises for pain unless they're directly related to mobility or motor control. And in very advanced, well, I'm not ready to say advanced, but in unique cases of central sensitization, it might look a lot like low levels of fitness, but you're asking the individual to deal with their perceptions. And as you add fitness components, you may find some good success in training that central sensitization, which is a very adapted or close to adapted construct where something that doesn't have to be painful really is painful. So special exercises is not just certain movements to bring your big lifts up. That's not only what they can be. We're going to use special exercises for movement to fill in the gaps so that your training looks the way you want it to look, and you're on this very predictable pattern of adaptation for whatever it is you're training. But again, all the movement skills and all the movement screening and how you have that keen movement evaluation to start to get those questions, those answers are only going to make sense when you really have a very directed, very keen training approach that says, this is what I need to do in order to achieve this.